Hello and welcome to today's webinar. In its most basic form, cloud technology is someone else's compute. Microsoft have found that 83% of all organizations have a hybrid approach to cloud, using either private and public providers to deliver their services. It's also been found that those organizations use between 2 and 11 cloud providers. So with numbers like that, you'd think that cloud was easy. However, many companies have found that the big challenge is handling security, costs, and regulatory requirements. So how does it work in practice? Today, we're going to investigate how Darlington Building Society's journey to the cloud revolutionized the way that they operate, and look at some of the challenges they had to overcome to get there. I'm Nick Westall, your host for today. I'm CSI's Chief Technology Officer, and I'm responsible for CSI's product strategy, their pre-sales, and their public cloud teams. CSI are a managed services organization who provide secure, resilient, hybrid cloud solutions for complex, demanding industries. Today, we have 2 polls to gauge where you are on your cloud journey, and we'll also have a panel Q&A at the end, and you can ask questions of the panel by posting them in the chat window that you've got within Zoom. Our first guest today joined the Royal Bank of Scotland in 1998 as a graduate trainee, before moving to Yorkshire Building Society as an asset and liability analyst. Moving to Lloyds Banking Group for 15 years, he became their head of interest rate risk. And in 2017, he became the chief risk officer for Darlington Building Society, before becoming their chief operating officer to drive their transformation agenda. When he's not busy with banking, he's a treasurer for the 700 Club, a charity where 700 people donate £50 to help buy homes for the homeless. Please welcome Chris Hunter. Hi, Chris. Our second guest started his career in IT with North Yorkshire Police before moving to Darlington Building Society in 2011, where over the last 11 years, he's risen to become the head of IT. When he's not delivering business change at Darlington, he's a board member of the Junction Foundation, a charity focused on supporting young people in the Teesside area. Please welcome Jonathan Harwood. Over the last 15 years, our third guest has held a variety of IT consulting and infrastructure roles in the northwest of the UK and in Sydney, Australia, before returning to the UK in 2018. For the last 3 years, he's led CSI's public cloud practice from his home base in Manchester. So please welcome Amar Bilas. So with our 4 panelists today, we're going to be asking a number of questions and going through a couple of different things so that you can understand what the journey was for Darlington as they've moved forward in their transformation journey. But first of all, we're going to have a look at a poll to help understand where you are in your journey. And that's going to appear on your screen now. So if you could select and tell us where you are on your modernisation journey, just choose the one that's the most appropriate to you. So leave that there for a couple of moments, just to allow everybody to get a chance to vote. And then hopefully we should see some results. Where are you on your modernisation journey? I think overwhelmingly with 68%, people are partway there. They're using software as a service, and there's some critical legacy apps haven't maybe quite made it over. After that, there are quite a few, 18% that haven't started. There are some that are really quite leading the way, where they've embraced the cloud and they're quite well on their journey. And then there are those, the smaller 5% that have absolutely embraced the cloud and they're just looking for optimization. So fantastic. What we're going to do now is understand a little bit more about Darlington and the journey that they've been on. So Chris, welcome to the webinar.
Hi Nick, hi everybody.
So please can you tell us a bit about Darlington Building Society and what the vision is?
Yeah, good morning again. So we're obviously Darlington and Amar Bilas based in the northeast of England. And like many of you on the call, our main purpose is to improve the lives of our members through supporting home ownership and encouraging savings, not just in the local area, but obviously from a national perspective from mortgages. We have approximately a £750 million balance sheet. We have 9 branches, 2 head office sites and around 180 staff. And those staff work with us from London, West Yorkshire, as well as in the northeast of England. And our strategic ambition is quite simple. We want to stay relevant in the markets in which we operate and offer a human touch alongside technological improvement.
It's all about the customer and change and supporting them. So you've been on this modernisation journey, and we've been with you. We've been honoured to be with you. So can you tell me what outcomes have you been trying to achieve with this journey?
Yeah, so we originally started this journey back in 2019 when our board agreed on what the time we called an ambitious change programme. Within this, we had a cloud-first principle for IT, so no longer the kind of servers in the cupboard, and we want to kind of move to a cloud-based platform. As part of this transformation, we wanted a new online savings platform, we wanted a new broker platform to bring the mortgages in, and IT infrastructure, amongst a number of other small changes which would improve the kind of customer journeys in society. The principal aim of the programme was to provide current and future members real choice in how they deal with us, both now and in the future, allow the business to scale efficiently and drive revenue growth faster than costs. Importantly, improve the working environments of our staff with less manual tasks and more value add, and be more resilient, reduce downtime and flexible technology to work anywhere.
So brilliant. So very much focused around your customers, both and your employees internally, but also workloads that help drive the business that also allow your customers to interact directly with the organisation. So you've been on this journey with CSI. So why did you choose CSI to help you?
Yeah, so when we started the cloud infrastructure project, we want to simplify our single points of failure within the organisation. So prior to coming on board with CSI, we had probably between 6 and 8 suppliers, which made incident management problematic. So everyone kind of put their hands up and said, it's not me, Gov, in terms of the issues which we faced. Therefore, we want to simplify that model and have a single point of contact within IT for everything, including wide area networks, Wi-Fi's, Windows operating environment, including 365, the firewall, network security, pretty much everything apart from SaaS and telephony. I think clearly we took an RFP process, and it was clear through that process that CSI understood our requirements and made a thorough pitch. In fact, I think it was CSI's first online pitch in the pandemic. So it was clear that the kind of attention to detail in which they wanted to partner with us to move our business forward. We're also impressed with their engagement model as well. So not only from a technical perspective, but also the C-suite engagement on overall project delivery, steerco, escalation process, etc. In addition to this, in terms of the infrastructure, CSI partnered with us at the start of the pandemic in terms of laptop security enhancements. And they also introduced us to another third party called RDB Management, who looked after our software databases. And effectively, since we went live with RDB and CSI, we've almost eliminated downtime in terms of that software database stance.
Brilliant. So really quite a broad coverage in terms of what you were looking to look after, bringing it down to a very small focus group of specialists to look after that environment. Absolutely brilliant. So it sounds like you've been on quite a journey. Now that we understand a little bit more about who Darlington are, why you've been on the journey, and why you selected CSI, what we're going to do is talk with the techies, talk to the people that actually had their hands on the keyboard. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jonathan Harwood from Darlington and Amar Bilas from CSI. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Nick. Hi, everybody.
So Jonathan, if we can start with you, maybe at a high level, can you tell us what the requirements did you need for the project to hit?
Yeah, absolutely. So at a high level, there were sort of 4 key areas we were looking for from the solution. Primarily scalability. So the ability to quickly bring new services up or scale them back depending on demand, rather than being limited by sort of physical based assets. Resilience, so a highly available solution that allowed continued access to services with very little to no downtime. Obviously, security, so a solution that secured the society data with sophisticated controls, alerting and monitoring. And finally, performance, so a highly performant environment, which our staff can conduct day-to-day operations without disruption. And I think this was well translated into the solution proposed by Amar and his team at CSI, specifically in the use of Microsoft Azure and sort of other enterprise class features that at the time we didn't really have access to, especially as a small organization. To the actual solution itself, to dig a little bit deeper from what Chris has just described, we moved to Microsoft Azure, so a migration and in some cases a rebuild of our critical virtual machine workloads from our then VMware hypervisor. And we've adopted Microsoft 365 with Office 365, Exchange Online, Azure Active Directory, even Teams and SharePoint. We're now starting to use in Anger in the society. In terms of security, we adopted Microsoft Intune, especially through the COVID and the pandemic delivery and the move to agile working for a delivery of consistent, secure device images to our endpoints, which are now mostly laptops. We've taken Azure Sentinel as a managed SIEM tool, collating logs and alerting from across our Azure tenancy, which is fully managed by the CSI security operations team. Azure Security Center to ensure that our new Azure hosted VMs are now compliant with the predefined security policies, which is great from an audit point of view, as well as a security one. And finally, silence endpoint protection, just to secure our endpoints with next generation antivirus application. But ultimately, we were looking to implement an IT infrastructure that provided a strong foundation for the rest of our strategic change agenda. And we feel the solution has absolutely achieved this.
Brilliant. So adopting a whole range of new technologies to help grow the company. It sounds like performance, resilience, scalability, and probably most importantly, security were big drivers for what you were trying to achieve. But yeah, really very much about enabling your staff and your customers while trying to sort of control those costs.
Absolutely.
It sounds like really quite a complex and broad project. And with projects like that, there's always going to be bumps in the road. So can you take us through maybe some of the challenges that you had to overcome during the project?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first and foremost, it doesn't come as a major surprise, but Brexit and COVID were probably some of the biggest challenges we had going through this project. Both were a bit of a roller coaster that caused delays with the overall timeline. From network hardware stuck in mainland European ports for weeks on end, CPU shortages impacting equipment procurement, even to BT engineers not able to attend some of our branches due to the 2 meters social distance. I think the COVID also influenced our ability to communicate. So I think in a perfect world, or a world without COVID at the time, some of the workshops and collaboration would have been done in person rather than across multiple Teams calls. I think this would have probably supported a better response when faced with project issues, as well as improved stakeholder management of key decisions. And I think the final challenge just to draw out was around sort of the size of our organization. So we had some internal resourcing pressures. So with a small IT team, the knowledge and capabilities can vary. So making sure we had the right people working with CSI on the design and delivery could impact our business as usual, as well as how we resourced our strategic change projects. We could have a bit of a capacity issue there. Eventually, we found the right balance, though, through sort of increasing our headcount, freeing up key resources, and probably leaning a little bit heavier on CSI to help us with some of those more bespoke technical bits.
Brilliant. So yeah, timing. Don't do it during COVID or at times of political upheaval and turmoil. And yeah, trying to drive a project when you can't be face to face and you can't actually let people in the same room as you. Yeah, big challenges. And yeah, lots of yeah, just trying to get hold of people. It must have been absolutely daunting at the time when that all came through. So I think you touched on it a little bit there in terms of some of the specialization for subject matter experts from CSI. But how did CSI help you through the project? What happened there?
So I think in terms of sort of what accelerated the delivery, it was very much around the methodology, which I believe Amar is going to come on to. But I really think that structured the project and helped us deliver those key milestones. Although we had a bit of an impact on our timeline, we were still able to manage the overall project and deliver it. And it is that technical resource. So with a small team, like I say, we vary in terms of capability. So we really did lean on CSI for some of those more bespoke bits, those more specialist areas around cloud. But I think genuinely there was a really positive, collaborative approach to the problem solving. With any project, especially with the scale, there are those bumps in the road out there. And I think where CSI really added that value was around that and how we approached it, and sort of getting into the detail of the services and how best to deliver those for the society.
Brilliant. So a structured approach with subject matter experts that are able to sort of augment your team and help extend them so you can get through the change.
Yeah, definitely guide us on sort of that migration into cloud, which is very new for the society at the time.
Yes, definitely. It's a big step when you're coming into such a large amount of new technology at the same time. It could be quite daunting, I would imagine. Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Much appreciated. We're going to skip over to Amar, and maybe we can get into some of the real sort of like technical nitty-gritty, a little bit more detailed down. So Amar, welcome. Please can you tell us a little bit more detail about the solution that CSI provided for Darlington and how it helped them along on their journey?
Of course, yeah. Good morning, everyone. I think what we want to start with is probably the first initial conversations that we had with Darlington. From the first meeting, it was clear to the business that security and compliance were the foundations of what we had to do. So all the technology stack, what we had to put on top, had to have the foundations for security, making sure we hit compliance, and making sure all the devices are secure. So again, with the sensitive data that the society deals with, we want to make sure that's protected and the devices aren't infected or causing any sort of malicious activity to the society. So we ended up picking out 3 products what were core to the technology stack. So first we used the FortiGate firewalls, so they're protecting the perimeter. So all the infrastructures behind a FortiGate firewall, we're constantly checking what traffic's coming in and out of the network. So again, there's analysis happening there. We're pushing logs over to a product called Azure Sentinel. So Azure Sentinel is the SIEM service. So again, it's giving a landscape view of everything what's happening in the technology stack, making sure there's no data leakage, making sure there's nobody who's logged into the system and running around and capturing data and copying and pasting data out of the network. So again, Sentinel's having a touch point on the Azure side, and also the SOPR banking platform. So all logs are getting collated into the Sentinel piece, and we're using AI built into the product to help track and understand what's happening in the environment. So again, if there's any alerts that are coming up, AI will understand going how risky is that alert. So again, it'll get flagged into our SOC service, and we'll have a bit of information of, right, well, we're seeing weird activity on point A and it's communicating to point B. And our SOC team will have a look at the information coming out of the Sentinel piece and start investigating it. The third piece on that one is silence. So silence was added to every single endpoint device, every single server that's running in the society's environment. And that's protecting at a new generation of protection. So this bit of software is actually looking at the behaviors of what's happening on the devices. So it's not actually looking for viruses, it's looking for malicious behaviors, what's happening. And again, that's getting flagged up into our SOC service. So once we understood what the foundations were for the society, we then started layering, well, we need Azure to run the virtual machines running in the environment. Again, because there was Brexit and COVID happening, that resourcing issue of trying to get technology and resourcing assigned to the business just didn't exist. We had endless amounts of resources that we could allocate. We could spin up virtual machines, we could spin up an entire test environment for the project phase, all through Azure at a reduced cost. And it just means we're not waiting about for new hardware. It's available to us at a click. And then the next piece was the SOPR banking platform, which is also in a private data center. So again, Darlington's using a true hybrid solution here. So Azure and the private data center hosting the software banking platform are all communicating each other through infrastructure, what's going behind the scenes, and it's not out on the internet, it's private, it's encrypted. So we're making sure that data isn't out in the world, it's all isolated and protected. Again, using the foundational services underneath, both of those platforms are being read. And then we're making sure that security is always going to be at the top of the tier for this. Next piece what we used was the Office 365 environments. Again, we're seeing a lot of businesses right now, they have a lot of on-prem servers. You have to worry about patching, for example, your Exchange server. You have to worry about, is my Exchange server set up in a high availability environment? Again, Office 365 removes that need. So we've migrated the society over to Exchange Online, and we now don't have a need for a virtual server. The Exchange server is always patched, it's always up to date. Again, the compliance headache of reporting that all my servers up to date, Office 365 takes care of that for the emails. SharePoint is in there as well. We're also using Microsoft Teams. So it came in really useful, especially around the project phase. It was one of the first products that we actually brought in for the project phase. So again, we were able to communicate on Teams, get the society's IT team talking to the project team, our operations team, all in a group chat. And again, because we didn't have the face-to-face piece, it just meant that we could get that reactiveness that we needed, that communication channel set up in place. And again, COVID and Brexit isn't going to slow us down. It did a bit, but the impact was minimum because we can get all the people that we need on there. And again, using the entire suite, that's how we built up Darlington. So it's been a full kind of package that we've had to transform. And again, the best bit is because these platforms that we're using constantly getting updated, constantly new products coming out, it's constantly getting secured, more compliance features. We're bringing that back into the society and making sure they're that one step ahead of everybody else. And we're not having to worry about, for example, bad patching or certain compliance pieces that have been missing because it's all built into the platform. So we'll move on to the project phase next. So again, we used a 4-step project phase for this one. It all started with strategy. So very early on in the project, we were having a look at, well, what's the business case for the society? Why are you moving over to public cloud? Is public cloud even the right piece for this? We then started doing a bit of analysis around the architecture. What does the society actually have? Is it capable of moving to Azure? Again, we're finding a lot of people that are going, yeah, we want to move cloud first. But again, there's lots of work that hasn't been identified very early on the strategy side. And again, the society would have been incurring a massive cost in the project phase to go out and fix things. But again, we identified what that was. We figured out what the employees at Darlington had. What's the skill set that you guys have? Is there anything that we can do to empower you to make sure that when we go in, you're not having to wait around, you've got that technology at your fingertips? Again, if you need to provide any gap analysis for training, we've worked on you guys going, right, what can't you handle, what can you handle? And again, bringing that back on board with CSI or with Darlington. And that moves us into the second bit. So once we have everything defined, we turn that into a scaffold. So again, a scaffold really just takes us into a document that's basically a design. What does this look like? So again, we're looking at the consult side of it as well. So again, talking about what sort of equipment do you have? How does it look like? What's our transformation options on this? We tried to bring in an Azure expert. Again, we really struggled to bring them on site, but we did this all through Teams. We created contractual documents with you, so making sure we have clear risks that have been set in there, dependencies, exit plans on how to come out of Azure if it's a fast exit. And again, moving into the high-level design and deployment phase. And that takes us on to the fast track piece. So again, fast track is our deployment services. So getting access to technical resources who are highly qualified. They understand the risks that have been documented. We understand how to modernize. So again, if there's any sort of servers that need to modernize, can we get rid of it? The fast track team will help modernize that environment. And again, we take that all into a deployment method, and we go out and have a QA period where we'll test and remediate any actions. And that will take us straight into the fast track piece. So once everything is deployed, it'll get handed over into the Flex support service. And again, the main thing out of this is once we move you into Azure, we don't want to just keep you there. We want to constantly develop, and we constantly want to improve the platform. So again, we're constantly looking at what's happening in the environment, what's new out in the market, and how can we improve the platform. Again, that being security or governance, resiliency, and how we can improve monitoring. So on the Flex support piece, we have a really strong governance model, what we use with Darlington. Again, everything's set to global CIS benchmark standards. What's the FCA actually looking at? So every year they'll bring out new rules and regulations. How do we make sure that the society is ahead of that? So again, we're constantly putting tweaks in, and all of that's just based around security. We want to make sure those tweaks aren't opening up any security holes that's leaving the society open to attack. Everything that we look at on that is resiliency. Again, downtime's a massive factor for any sort of financial services piece. We want to make sure if something has a big business impact for an outage, which has obviously been identified at the strategy piece, we want to make sure we pump up the resiliency on there. And again, everything's handled by our monitoring platform, which is monitored 24/7. We know exactly what's happening in the environment, and we've also got preemptive fault finding. So again, if we know something's going to cause a massive issue, we'll know a week ahead. Right, there may be some storage issues that we need to increase, or there may be some network issues. And again, the last piece, what we're looking at is the automation. So everything that we do for the society is always through automation. It's basically a rinse and repeat effort. The idea is if you pay for it once, again, that's your IP. You can use that over and over again. So for example, if you want to deploy 2 new virtual machines, we'll automate that, and we'll have that in the catalog. So again, if you ever need those 2 virtual machines, instead of having to go through a 6-week period of trying to deploy some virtual machines, we can now deploy that in 30 minutes because we know what the settings and the rules are. So that takes us over to next piece, which is back to you, Nick.
Brilliant. So it sounds like security was absolutely key, and that was it was really quite a big piece in terms of melding together sort of like a private cloud that Darlington already had to a certain degree with public cloud, so Azure in this case, bring them together as a single environment, but with the scalability capability that was in there, resilience, and importantly controlling cost. But there was a lot of risk management in there, a good structured approach, aim, plan, do, review, with sort of a fast track delivery process for deployment. And then at the end, a comprehensive managed service with Flex support to provide lots of automation against globally recognized security standards. So just making sure that we're always being kept honest, as we say.
Correct. I think one of the best bits what we've managed to do out of this as well, Nick, is we've actually set the rules within the public cloud platform. Mm-hmm. So again, if somebody wants to jump in and deploy a resource within the Azure platform, we have certain rules going. Basically, you can't open up a virtual machine out to the internet. The rules are in place and it's hard to break. So again, it gives that scalability and agility, so we don't have to worry about opening up massive holes in the environment whilst the society is scaling up.
Yeah, so governance, so you make sure you can't do things by mistake, almost. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Amar. We're going to bring Chris back in again now. So Chris, welcome back. Can you tell us some of the key benefits that that Darlington's been looking to and actually achieved as part of this project?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. If I touch on governance first and the steps we took to see the benefits in the business. So I think the first step was obviously reading the EBA guidelines at the time in terms of outsourcing and ICT security standards. So the kind of key benchmarks in terms of what the regulators are looking for, and they've also been adopted effectively by the PRA and the FCA. We effectively then produced a business case which board approved, completed the risk assessment using the EBA methodology, and both of those were shared early with the PRA, ahead of the PRA authorising it. And those risk assessments have also been tracked through our board risk committee over the life of the project to make sure that they had sample oversight on the project. We also used a legal firm for the contract negotiations and additional protections for the society as well, and especially on GDPR, given the fact that we've got member data in there. And obviously what effectively we have with the CSI partnership and the third and fourth parties that are associated with that, we effectively had layered risk in terms of data breaches, etc. And we need to make sure that they were covered amply for the society. And also within that contract, we had exit planning. Every good marriage starts with divorce planning. So we effectively started that early as well, which again is part of the regulations. We didn't stop there though on the governance. We also commissioned a third party to oversee the IT controls within CSI, which was also shared with the PRA. And finally, after all that had taken place, we sent all that information through to the PRA and FCA. I had to sign a SMF 24 attestation, not quite in blood, but effectively saying that I'd taken the appropriate steps to make sure that we'd had sufficient oversight over you as a firm, and obviously understood the risks with regards to outsourcing and managed services on a cloud environment. After that, we got final approval, and you're probably wondering, well, what are the actual benefits of this, Chris? But I think it's clear from a firm perspective that you need to make sure you've got the right governance in place to manage your cloud outsourcing risks. But the key bit for me as well is that you don't just take what we did for the CSI project and leave it on the shelf. We've applied the same methodology for other procurements and other software as a service and other projects in the society as well. So we've effectively taken a step change in terms of our overall governance of projects. The second bit I'd like to kind of just touch on is the kind of first mover advantage. Saw from the poll earlier that quite a few firms are in that. We've done a little bit, but not a lot in terms of the cloud environments. I think in 2019, we were kind of clear that what we were outlining was probably outside of our peers in terms of taking a bold step forward and taking some quite significant investments in the business and modernising that business forward. Quite clearly, COVID then hit before we kind of got the kind of wheels in motion. But we took a call in the probably the darkest days of April, May 2020 to actually carry on. And that not only takes a bit of guts, and you might think we were quite stupid in doing that, but what COVID told us is that it's really apparent that we needed to invest and transform the business. As a simple example, our laptop deployment in COVID was quite fractured. We had to have some departments without access to systems for kind of 2 to 3 weeks. And when we kind of compare that now to the likes of train strikes or heat waves, etc., we can quite easily flick between a head office environment, a branch environment, or a home environment. And it's really easy for our staff to do that. So 2 years on, as we mentioned in terms of first mover, we are cloud outsourced with CSI. We've also put in a new telephony system. We've got a brand new website. We're live on our new broker portal at scale, and we're in the final throes of our online project. All of which, for me, give us options for the future. The environment that we're operating at the moment is as uncertain as ever, with the kind of cost of living crisis, inflation, war in Ukraine, etc. And it probably feels like we've actually never left the COVID pandemic. But what that allows for me, for the society, is to control its own destiny and stay relevant for our members in the future, which obviously, as a member-led organisation, is the key thing that keeps us moving as a business forward.
Brilliant. So it sounds like there was a heck of a lot of planning up front, contract negotiations, working with the regulators, bringing in third-party controls just to make sure that you've got that level of independence, and not least of which a strong personal commitment that was in there. It sounds like it was a quite painful process to go through. But yeah, good to hear that it's actually a first mover advantage. That's it's quite interesting to see how some of the other players within the marketplace are there. That there was the top 5% in that poll that were sort of living and breathing the cloud dream. So it'd be interesting to find out what they've seen from it as well. But also really interesting that you use COVID as a driver to accelerate change and actually bring a lot of new benefits to the building society. and indeed actually bring more control and flexibility, but with flexibility, so that you're actually more agile in the future. So yeah, it was quite a broad mix of change and benefit to the organisation. I suppose there's one big question, and I suppose we touched on it with Jonathan as well, but from your perspective, what would you do differently?
It's a good question, Nick. I think with hindsight, I wouldn't, from an overall program perspective, I wouldn't do anything different in terms of the start date. What I would have done is put more resource in place internally. Back in 2020, we went into it probably not realising just how hungry we were for resource in terms of the change. And obviously, when you've got a lot of BAU going on as well, it's difficult to kind of move people over and hire people as well in the pandemic and make sure that they're actually performing for you. I think you'd never do it in Brexit again, but I think the message for me is that the world is always going to be uncertain, and doing nothing isn't acceptable anymore, because the competitive landscape that's out there for small building sites at the moment is moving much faster than we've moved historically, and we need to continue that movement going forward. And, we're not trying to become, your Monzos and your Atom Banks, but it's really, really important that we stay relevant for our members, and not only our members today, but members of the future. I think people are more cognizant now of what mutuality brings to them as individuals and fits in with their kind of community ethos that's come out of the pandemic. And I think putting technological change alongside that human touch, as I said at the start, is going to be really important for us going forward.
Splendid. So yeah, not COVID, not Brexit. Much prefer to do it face to face. Yeah, finding resourcing. I know that going through the recruitment process during COVID was really quite a challenge and a real step change for many people. But yeah, and we've seen this a lot with quite a number of other organisations that we speak with, that there's a competitive imperative that you can't just stand still, and you've got to be supportive of your customers, particularly as they're going through change, whether it's through political turmoil or COVID or just changes to their industry. Yeah, so yeah, it's great if you can go fast, but yeah, there's only so much you can do within a certain period of time. So what next for Darlington? What's on the roadmap?
As a kind of outline, Nick, we're getting close to our live date for our online project. I think for then it's to continue to enhance that security framework and continue to execute on the business benefits which we're now seeing from technological change. We are also considering how we kind of manage the software relationship and the software hosting. Talked about it being in private cloud earlier, and it's whether we move that into a kind of public cloud environment as well, and again see some of the benefits in terms of scalability, etc. So that's something that we're kind of currently reviewing within kind of Q4 this year.
So lots going on by the sounds of it, and never ends.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. We're going to, before we have our panel discussion, we're going to have our second poll. And this time we want to understand what's stopping you from getting on with your modernization journey out there. So your journey to the cloud. Let me know what you think. Click on the ones that are most relevant to you, and you can choose as many as you want on this, not just constricted to just the one. Let's give you all a few moments just to make that, and then hopefully we should see the results. So just a reminder, our first poll was saying that yeah, most people are really just trying to get on that journey to go to the cloud, trying to understand where they're up to at the moment, and now hopefully we should get to find out what it is that causes a challenge to achieve that. So now this isn't unusual. Lack of technical resource and headcount internally, and actually some of the questions we've seen coming in for the poll are around that as well. So maybe we'll touch on that in the panel. But But the second one, strategy needs defining. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you don't have the people, if you don't know where you're going, that's going to be a challenge for you. And then coming in the last two, security and compliance. So it depends, I suppose, how strong you are on your regulatory control and how you understand how the technology is going to affect that. But getting executive support, I think when we saw that there were quite a few people that were already on that journey and had started to embrace it, that the executive buy-in that we maybe didn't see 6-7 years ago, there's been a real flip there. So no one would touch the cloud, particularly in a regulatory environment, that now seems to have gone away. So thank you very much for filling out the poll. What we'll do now is we're going to welcome everybody back, and we're going to have a panel and ask a few questions and see what we can pull out. And we've got lots of questions that have been coming in, so I'm just going to pull those over so that we can actually see what they are. And so yeah, there's been a couple of questions about Sopra. So I suppose we'll pitch this one to Jonathan to start off with. So we mentioned that Sopra is in a private data center. Who owns and manages that, and is it still Darlington?
So it is. It's hosted by a third party, but we still manage it to some degree. But as Chris alluded to, we do have like a bit of a management wrapper around that, looking at more of that third line support development side. So looking after the management of the actual databases, making sure they're available, if there's any downtime, the alerting and monitoring, etc. But in terms of the Sopra application, upgrading Sopra, that all still comes through the building society and through to Sopra. So it's mainly that high level management piece that we've sort of outsourced. The rest of it still sits with us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Chris, maybe one for you. How was the migration perceived by both your customers and your employees, and how much disruption was there to them?
Yeah, I think like any building site, you've probably got some resistance to change from more tenured staff, shall we say, in the society. I think it's key that you kind of need to enhance some minds around that. I think when they've got over the fact that change is coming and it's happening, and they can start to see the business benefits, and you kind of get that enthusiasm within the business, you generally find that more people kind of convert. We also took out the shortcuts where people could access the old world as well. So we kind of forced people. After we did, we kind of did the softly approach first, and then took a hard line. And I think sometimes you've got to do that. I think from a customer perspective, I think the difficulty there is that customers notice when things go wrong, they expect it to go right. And I would say that our incidences of things like the systems being down, the counter being down, have reduced materially over the last 2 years. And certainly now we're not seeing those issues raised within our IT department. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's perfect. I think part of one of the issues that we've got at the moment is effectively you're inputting legacy systems into modern infrastructure. And some of those legacy systems are kind of built in the 1990s. It's almost like a Betamax video trying to be played on Netflix, and it's quite difficult to kind of map the two together. So it's not perfect, and there is a bit of latency, but effectively, it's a lot better than it was before. So from a staff and customer perspective, I'm hoping to see the benefits.
Brilliant. So there's a little bit of hand holding and supporting, but a little bit of a scorched earth policy behind, and then just helping to sort of like manage both those people inside and outside the organization as well. Yeah. Probably a more technical question again, coming back for Jonathan. So what infrastructure did you move away from? So what's been replaced and what's gone?
Yeah, absolutely. So mainly what we had originally was terminal services environment on an old VMware hypervisor, and that was probably the core back end of our infrastructure. We've had that for a number of years. I think we're coming up to maybe 5-6 years of that hypervisor. So the main move into Azure was to take the critical workloads from that terminal services Windows environment and put them into Azure. and consolidate where we needed to. I think at the time we had about 80 VMs for a society of our size. We've only got one per head count, and it was quite big. So we took the opportunity through this project to consolidate that, improve on the terminal services environment through Azure Virtual Desktop, and to leverage some of the performance. So where we were sort of stuck behind some of the hardware capacities of our old VM infrastructure, we were able to tune the Azure infrastructure to have a much better sort of desktop experience for our users. So it was very much that old hypervisor in a data center somewhere, lift and shift migration over into Azure.
Splendid. So it's a little bit more responsive, a little bit more functional, and yeah, just moving away, but something that people still understood and they can work with easily.
Yeah, we had a bit of a vision, which was at the time, if you think of the user experience at Darlington as a member of staff, was some of the critical workloads might have been on a separate virtual machine, so you could be jumping between various different VMs to actually access certain workloads. So the vision was to consolidate that into like a single desktop environment. And we achieved that through AVD. And that is definitely one of the benefits we saw, where the users they log in, they have access to all the critical workloads through essentially a single pane of glass. There's no more sort of VM hopping, that type of thing. They log on in the morning through their MFA, etc., through the security, and then they can just do their day-to-day work. It's a much improved experience.
Yeah, so keeping it simple all in one place.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I think we've got room for 2 questions. So the first one we'll go through, there's actually been a number of questions around this one, but I'll choose the one that seems to be about the right way. So it's all about resourcing. So can you give us an idea of the volume and types of resources you needed in terms of the technical roles, and how many people did you, how's that changed your own IT department? Has it grown? Have you got the same number of people?
So we've grown a little bit. Hopefully Mark can tell you from the CSI side how many people we need in terms of specialist side of it. But from a Darlington one, we probably went from, we're a team of 10 to give you some context, but that's cut across various specialisms. From a technical area that worked on the project, we're at a head count now of about 4. At the time it was probably about 3, but while we're going through the project, we also worked with some contractors as well, to help support some of the strategy, some of the thinking, and some of the design that was coming out of CSI. So there was some scalability there that we sort of scaled back once the project started to land and we started to go live. We still have 4 headcount now, but I think the roles are starting to materially transition. So where we were more operational focused, sort of getting monitors, keyboards out, laptops out, that element's becoming smaller, and we're starting to sort of organically transition sort of naturally into more of a second line role, where we translate the requirements of the business to CSI and they help us design it. We do some of the triage and some of the fixes that come out of like a first line support arena. But mostly it's around making sure that CSI is supporting us in the way that we expect them to support us, and we challenge you as our partner to make sure that's happening. So we are very much in a bit of a transition phase, and we're sort of managing that now.
Perfect. And that actually pitches into the final question, and maybe this one for you, Chris. So how have you found managing the ongoing oversight of CSI as a material outsourced service provider and on an ongoing basis to satisfy your regulatory controls? And there's a little one that are sneaking in there, is do you have the skills internally for that oversight, or have you sought the third party to sort of continue supporting you?
Yeah, so we have regular meetings with CSI, as kind of mentioned at the start. They take place at a kind of operational level, but also at a kind of C-suite level. And that's how we kind of manage the kind of strategic bit. I think obviously we have a program of assurance over CSI, so we complete pen tests as an example, and we use a third party to do that. In addition to that, obviously the ongoing due diligence piece is important, and we've invested in the Helios platform, which CSI are on there. And that's a real benefit to us, because it stops about having to ask you directly for documents every year, and they're all kind of there in the portal. We probably had to add an extra half FTE to kind of complete that work and keep that ongoing due diligence going, which is part of the outside of the IT function, but it's part of the overall procurement function and change function. the final part is around the third party resource that we probably need in terms of internally. I think internally we need to move away from IT staff that manage kind of technical equipment. And what we need IT staff to do in the future is manage third party relationships to a large extent, understand how everything kind of fits together. So it's more solution architects rather than box shifters, so to speak. And that's what we're kind of seeing in terms of that change in resource, but that's there because that helps us provide the oversight to the third party outsource providers.
So a slight growth to cover the breadth of what you're covering, an evolution really in the way in which the team are working and what they have to do, but just making sure that you've got that regulatory control in there. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. We do have some more questions that have come through, and there'll be a link at the end that we'll answer all of the questions and make sure that everybody can get all of the answers that they were looking for. And indeed, if you want to keep on putting questions into the chat at the moment, we'll add those in and add them to the list and give you answers for them. So we've got one final bit before we finish up, and that's really pitching to the outcome from what we've been talking about today, but also those two polls. And that most of you are just starting that journey or trying to figure out what you're going to do. You've got resource constraints, so you haven't necessarily got the people that can help you on that journey that you're going to go to. And that hybrid journey is essential so that you can remain competitively relevant, but also so that you can be agile enough to support your customers going forward. But equally, you need some help in terms of understanding what the strategy is going to be and how you can get there. So what we've got is a package of work that we can provide free to any of the organizations that have subscribed to the webinar today. And that's really just to help you simplify that next stage and to get going, understand what is possible within your environment and how you can kickstart your journey into the hybrid cloud. So this information will be available for you at the end. So if you follow the QR code there, and we'll make sure that this is emailed out as well later on, that will take you back through to a landing zone where there's a case study about Darlington. There's the offer is in there, and we'll put all of the answers to all of the questions. The questions will probably kick in the next 24 hours. So we'll look to see if we can get them up there as fast as we possibly can, but the other bits there are there already. And with that, we've managed to finish in time. So I'd say thank you very much to Jonathan, to Amar, and most definitely to Chris. Thank you very much, and we look forward to running another webinar again with you soon. Thank you.